These days, I'm very skeptical of most sensational-sounding headlines that I see, and how could you not be? The wilder the headline, the more likely you'll see an editor's note explaining how the headline was garbage a week or two later once the story has outlived its usefulness. It's also fair to say I'm pretty skeptical of sensational allegations against cops because that trend is particularly true in that context. We've seen it countless times over the last few years. A cop gets accused of brutality based on 10 seconds of footage and some big bold headline, and then slowly the context and the evidence drips in. And then you can see why that officer acted that way and why that event unfolded that way. It doesn't mean that it's always justified. It just means there's a common media thirst to make police interactions look unjustified when the story first breaks. So when I see a headline like Arkansas State Trooper flips pregnant woman's car with a pit maneuver, these days I'm automatically primed to doubt that a little bit, at least as a complete description. What exactly happened to prompt that move? Is this woman a wanted criminal? Was she dangerously fleeing police at 100 miles an hour? Was she 100 yards away from a school zone or some old lady crossing the street convention? A pit maneuver is an aggressive move, so there had to be more to this story, I was thinking. Police generally don't just attack and flip someone's car for no good reason, except for when they do, apparently, and this story is one such example, which is why it's a good story to look at. Any story that challenges your preconceptions and makes you realize that your first inclinations about it were totally wrong is a story worth some consideration. For some understanding in this story, let's start with what is a pit maneuver. PIT is an acronym for Pursuit Intervention Technique. If you ever watch police chase footage, you'll often see the chase end this way. It's a method to stop a fleeing car. The approaching officer nudges the side rear of the fleeing car and gives it a bump to turn it sideways, and when executed well, the fleeing car is turned around and stopped, or at least trappable. When executed well being a very important phrase there. For proper use, there needs to be both an urgent need for this tactic and its successful deployment. Obviously, the move is very dangerous, not just for the fleeing driver and the cop who bumps him, but for uninvolved people and property in the area. A car at high speed suddenly losing control can cause a lot of damage. And it appears, in this case, there was neither. There wasn't an urgent need for a pit maneuver, and it was executed poorly, or at least it produced a very dangerous outcome. Nicole Harper was, at the time, a 38-year-old Arkansas mother-to-be. 2 months into her pregnancy, clocked driving 84 miles an hour in a 70-mile-an-hour zone on Highway 167 outside of Jacksonville. As seen here on Arkansas State Trooper Rodney Dunn's dash cam, as soon as the officer flashes his sirens and begins pursuit, Nicole slows down, engages her blinker, and merges right. This particular stretch of the highway has a narrow shoulder and a concrete barrier blocking the roadside, so Nicole continues looking for a safe place to pull over and engages her hazard lights. This pursuit continues this way at what appear to be relatively low speeds for about 2 minutes. At one point, the officer pulls up beside Nicole, but at no point does Nicole pass an exit or a turnoff or any more suitable place to pull her car over. After those 2 minutes, for a second time, the trooper pulls up on the side of Nicole's car, except this time he bumps her car's rear and stops her by force, and rather violently. The pit maneuver sent Nicole crashing into the opposite barrier, flipping her car upside down. And that's infuriating enough, but wait, there's more. Upon approaching the wrecked car, the trooper asks Nicole to come out as though she's some holed-up criminal resisting arrest and not a woman whose car was just flipped and is quite possibly in dire medical condition.
Can you get out? Come on out. Come out this way, right here.
Instead of assessing her condition, he asks her why she didn't stop.
Why didn't you stop?
Because I didn't feel like it was safe.
Well, this is where you ended up.
He accuses her of fleeing throughout and repeats that this scene is her fault.
We call it a pit maneuver when people flee from us or don't stop from us. That's what happened, okay? All you had to do was pull over, man, okay? Well, this is what happens when people don't stop for us.
You wreck us?
We hit the vehicle.
This event actually happened last summer, but we're seeing this footage and learning the story now because Nicole has filed a lawsuit against state police alleging negligence and excessive force. She wasn't seriously injured in the crash, and if you're wondering, neither was her unborn child, who was born in February and is now a 4-month-old healthy baby girl. But that's not to say that there wasn't plenty of undue anxiety over the child's fate. In the emergency room after the crash, A doctor told Nicole that her daughter's fetal heartbeat could not be detected, and it was then believed that the baby had died. Her lawyer says Nicole cried herself to sleep that night, but an OB exam the next day did find the heartbeat, and of course, the baby survived. And if you're still not frustrated enough by this story, just wait, there's still more. On confrontation after the crash, the trooper tells Nicole that she was wrong not to pull over immediately, and that her actions were suspicious and not clear in intent to the officer.
I have no idea what's going on inside your vehicle or why you wouldn't stop. Been doing this for 27 years, ma'am, and when people don't stop, we have no idea what's going on inside the vehicle.
Except those statements are in total contradiction with the state police themselves. Not only did Nicole not do anything wrong here, she actually did everything right. By the book. Literally, the Arkansas State Police Driver License Study Guide book. If you are stopped by police, according to the study guide, activate your turn signal or flashers to indicate to the officer that you are seeking a safe place to stop. Yet this trooper takes exactly that as an indicator of suspicious or threatening activity to be rolled and wall crashed immediately. She gave police the exact signal that police request, and police didn't understand it. And as bad as that mistake and misunderstanding is, mistakes and misunderstandings do still happen. So if police just acknowledge some misconduct here, we could probably all agree on some efforts to minimize the likelihood that this ever happens again. Except police don't acknowledge any misconduct here. That trooper, Rodney Dunn, was never disciplined. He's still on the job, and there was no criminal accountability. As Nicole's lawyer explains, that trooper responded to a simple speeding issue with deadly force. And as far as this lawsuit, state police are staying mostly quiet, which at some level is understandable because it's generally not advisable to start yapping publicly when facing legal action. But state police aren't staying totally quiet. State Police Director Bill Bryant gave a statement to local media that again implicitly accuses Nicole of misconduct. It reads in part, quote, "There's a fundamental state law none of us should ever forget. All drivers are required under Arkansas law to safely pull off the roadway and stop when a police officer activates the patrol vehicle emergency lights and siren. In every case a state trooper has used a pit maneuver, the fleeing driver could have chosen to end the pursuit by doing what all law-abiding citizens do every day when a police officer turns on the blue lights. They pull over and stop. In every case?" Another way to read that is that the pit maneuver has never been incorrectly or unjustly used, at least in Arkansas. And that's a tall claim, but a state senator speaking with a local reporter says much the same thing.
At the end of the day, when somebody is fleeing, I will never question the method a police officer uses to stop them. I don't care if it's 60 miles an hour. I don't care if it's 100 miles an hour. I want them stopped as soon as possible and taken off our streets.
Again, when somebody is fleeing, Nicole was not fleeing. She slowed down and indicated that she was seeking safe pullover. Stop immediately cannot be the standard. If I slam on the brakes and stop in the lane of traffic, I think police will have some dispute with that. So it's not stop immediately. It's stop as quickly as possible, safely. That is the standard that Nicole was trying to uphold with both her vehicle signals and her explanation at the scene.
Because I didn't think it was safe for you. That's why I didn't stop.
I have no idea about that.
Now, is safely somewhat of a subjective judgment? Yes. But that's why we have mechanisms to signal the intent of making that judgment, which Nicole used, and perhaps a time frame beyond 2 minutes to make that judgment before we flip someone's car in potentially deadly fashion would be a reasonable grace period. There was one brief quote in that local video story that exemplifies the issue here. It wasn't directly from that state senator, but it was attributed to him.
Other lawmakers on the committee say troopers shouldn't be questioned.
Everyone should be questioned, always, but particularly those in power. The power to use deadly force with immunity from even basic scrutiny isn't just a recipe for abuse. It's a guarantee for commercial scale production. If you look at this story and you watch that video and you don't see any questions to ask, well, the rest of us won't ask any questions when we see your steaming wreck on the side of the highway either. We'll just laugh and we'll say, good, glad to see you removed from the streets as quickly as possible too. And when you ask the EMS personnel if you're going to be okay, just remember, shut the hell up No questions allowed. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Parler, that is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.